All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started just because everyone's able to kind of enter the room themselves. So thank you for being muted. It's so odd to kind of do these Zoom meetings and presentations, and I see nothing but either names or letters. So bear with me. I'm used to being a lot more interactive. So I might appear nervous because I can't read faces. And anyways, we're just going to kind of see how this goes. So thank you for being muted. There is going to be an opportunity after I kind of go through the introduction to positive discipline for you all to type your questions in the chat. And then I will be able to answer some of those questions. We have some Children's House teachers here in attendance, which is great. Josie Sprayer, our executive director, is here, which is wonderful, and she'll kind of help go through the questions and help me know which ones to answer. So anyway, so thank you for coming tonight. My name is Faye Masterson, and I'm the director of Children's House. I've been a Montessori educator for 20 plus years and was first introduced to positive discipline when I was in my Montessori training, which was way back in the day in 2000. I taught at a school where the positive discipline approach was used throughout the whole school, toddler through middle school, which was really nice because we all had a consistent approach with the children when we talked about and talked to the children. We were consistent and we had the same language, which we found was very effective. And here at Sterling has used the positive discipline approach. And just last year, we had a refresher and we revisited that positive discipline as a part of our our professional development goal. And the goal was always for us to bring it to the parents. COVID hit and it kind of halted our plans of trying to get it to the parents and start that process to bring these tools to you guys, because really we find that with that parent and school partnership, the more we are in line, the more positive effect that we have on children. And so that's why it is very important that we want to be able to introduce this to you guys and share some of our tools with you. As I said, tonight is just an introduction to what positive discipline is. I won't go too deeply into the tools to add to your toolbox, but we'll talk a little bit about it, kind of dangle the carrot and hopefully encourage you to attend more. We have 60 some plus participants. Typically in a positive discipline parenting class or parenting group, you don't have 60 participants. You typically have a smaller group because it's intimate. You know, you share and ask a lot of questions about some scenarios that you're dealing with. And, you know, we kind of use it as a support group to help one another. So you have it a little bit smaller. So as at the end of this, I'll send out an email and just kind of gauge the interest so that we can kind of see where we go with this, see how many of you are interested. Like I said, I don't know how this is going to be over Zoom. I'm not going to put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm hoping you don't walk out of here feeling like you sat in a college lecture and run for the hills. But anyways, we'll do the best that we can here. So what is positive discipline? Positive discipline is an approach to behaviors that is kind and firm at the same time. It's an approach that helps children feel a sense of belonging and significance. The best way that I can describe belonging and significance is really just kind of make you think about how you feel. If you can remember a time when maybe you were in a social setting, when you walked into a room and you were around some people and you didn't feel like you fit in, you didn't feel like you had a place, you didn't feel a sense of belonging or that you even mattered. What I want you to do is go back and say or think about, how did that make you feel? And did it motivate you? Did it motivate you to try and get attention, either positive or negative attention, just so that you could feel like you belong there. Well, your children are no different. Positive discipline is effective for the long term. It teaches valuable social and life skills for good character. It invites children to discover how capable they are and use their personal power in constructive ways, and not always use those negative attention-seeking, power-seeking behavior that makes us feel frustrated, angry, or even manipulated. So why positive discipline? Positive discipline because we want to raise responsible, respectful, and resourceful members of community. So what I want you to do is I want you to kind of fast forward yourself, you and your husband. You're sitting on the couch. We're going to fast forward 25 years. And what we're going to do is you're sitting on the couch with your husband and you get a knock on the door. You open the door and it's your son or your daughter. And what I want you to do is I want you to imagine who you hope you see before you. What do you hope you see? What characteristics do you hope that you see? And I'm just going to kind of pause right there. And I want you to think about that. What kind of characteristics and life skills do you hope you see in your son or daughter? The reason why this is an important kind of activity for us to think about is so often we're living in the moment and you're focusing on the challenging behaviors and we forget about what our goal is. And we don't realize that the discipline methods that we're using today are not really helping us achieve what we want in our children. We just think that if we tell them to do it, they're going to just do it. And believe me, I've fallen into that trap. But the first step in learning to be the best parent, not the perfect parent, because there is no such thing, is to create our roadmap to help guide us to our destination, to those future skills that we're hoping to gain, to get out of our children or to have our children get. Positive discipline is that approach that we're hoping in future sessions that we're going to give you the tools that we use to add to your toolbox when you're interacting with your child and when you're dealing with these challenging behaviors. All of the tools that we're going to share with you over the upcoming months, we hope, are going to help you arrive at your destination. So when you're writing and thinking about these characteristics, I suggest that you and your partner fill this list out separately. It is something that when we get into the class, that would be one of your homework assignments, to sit down, write them separately, and then come together to discuss and compare what you have on your list. I say that it's important for you to do it separately because, you know, we all have our different ideas of what we want. And it's important to know what our partner feels and then have that discussion. If you have grandparents that are heavily involved or in the raising of your children, it's important for you to get them involved in this process as well. Share your hopes and dreams, and then you create that roadmap. So I've worked with many parents throughout the years, through teaching, through doing this positive discipline class with them. And we do this 2-list activities. The now list, which is your challenges. What are you dealing with right now that is challenging when you're thinking about what you're seeing in your children? And then the second list is your future list. And those are the characteristics and life skills. So again, another activity, and I'm just going to kind of slow things down because I want you to think about this. So what are the challenges that you're dealing with? And then what are the future skills? Because again, goes along this roadmap that you need to kind of focus your attention on. I'm just going to give you a minute to think about that. So I've done this for long enough. And what I will say is the majority of the now or the challenges list looks something like this. My child won't listen. He always whines. I can't get him to stop whining. He's talking back. He says no to me all the time. The temper tantrums, lack of motivation. Sometimes we call him lazy. Won't do chores. Can't get him to do anything. Uses potty language all the time, especially when he's talking to his brother or sister. Defiant, just doesn't care. Interrupts me all the time. I'm on that phone, and every time I get on that phone, little Billy's interrupting me. Strong-willed. Morning hassles, won't get dressed, won't brush their teeth, won't go to bed, gets up all the time. Lying, doesn't tell the truth. Fighting constantly. Biting if they're younger. Future characteristics and life skills looks like this. I want them to have a belief in their own personal capability. I want them to have a high self-esteem, be self-disciplined, flexible, responsible, have accountability for their actions, resilient, communication skills. We don't want them to be good. We want them to be curious, have problem-solving skills, respect themselves and others, self-motivated to learn, compassionate. We want them to have a good work ethic, be employed, and move out of my house. We want them to have a social consciousness, be honest, have a great sense of humor, happy, self-confident, courageous, take risks, desire to cooperate and contribute. I love that. I feel exhausted after looking at that. And I think when we think about those things, we forget that there's steps to get there. And when you're in this world with young children, all we focus on is the challenges. And all we think is if we tell them to do it, they're going to do it, and then it's going to happen. So again, we want you to focus on that end kind of result of what it is you're looking for so that we can create the roadmap. And it's a lot. And if you think about that, they're pretty lofty goals. So here, what we want to do is create that roadmap, and we want to share positive discipline with you so that we can help you guys understand that behavior challenges are wonderful opportunities to teach your children the valuable social and life skills that you want for them. So without those challenges, you're not going to be able to get there. So they're needed. And so it's how you approach it. The behaviors can be annoying and make our life difficult. But as we tell the children, there are those wonderful opportunities to help our brain grow, and it helps us build connection with each other. And so we want you to be able to learn to incorporate this approach into your everyday interaction. Punishment and rewards is something that is short-term and doesn't drive them to want to make the right choices. And so this is an approach that is an internal drive for them. So I kind of went through this. So what you're going to learn is just punishment and rewards don't work. And you're going to get many parenting tools that will empower and encourage you to interact with your children and help them make those right choices and work towards meeting those goals. So I have a little activity that kind of moves us into communication and communicating with our children. So it's a two-step activity. It's called the do and don't. And I'm going to start. The only instructions that I have is that you're just going to follow my instructions. And then if you'll put in the chat, we'll talk about kind of how you were feeling. And Josie, if you'll look at that chat and kind of sum up kind of the things that parents are saying when they're giving us, when we start to debrief. So round one is going to begin. You're going to move around a little bit. Ready? Don't sit down. Don't look at me. Don't look at the wall. Don't keep your hands down. Don't close your mouth. Don't open your mouth. Don't stand still. Don't fidget. Don't stand up. Okay? Round one is over. Round two. Stand up. Look at another person. That one's funny in Zoom. Look at the floor. Raise your hand. Open your mouth. Close your mouth. Jump up and down. Be still. Sit down. So how did that make you feel? Round one. What were you thinking in round one? And I can't see the chat. So Josie, if you'll kind of see, if you'll type in the chat.
I'll read them as they
Okay.
Confusing because there's different directions happening. Too many directions. Restricted. Stopped your thinking. Negative to hear. Tough to follow. Goes against the principles of personal freedom and independence. Just followed and didn't rationalize. Uncomfortable.
And round two. How did it make you feel? What were you thinking?
Easy to follow and clear. Robotic. Clarity. Like a game. Knew what was expected and fun. The do command feels more firm and positive than the don't command.
Okay. Thank you for that. So you all touched base on all of the things and pretty much how your children feel when we use the don't sit down, the don't look at me. Okay, well, I'm not going to sit down. I'm going to run around. So you're telling me not to sit down, but what do you want me to do? The communication is very vague and I'm having to double process versus round two, where I'm very clear and concise. You're actually telling me what to do. I know what to expect. So very much debriefed, kind of hit all the parts. And that's what it's all about. It's really about communication and it's about connection. And so when we hear parents tell us all the time that they just won't listen to me, but how do you get them to listen in the classroom? And one thing that I always would tell parents and I'm sure all of my teachers do this is, well, how do you listen? How do you feel when you don't feel listened to? So how do we get them to entice them that we want them to make those choices, want to listen, and that really comes from connection. So they're going to listen to you after they feel listened to. Children have big feelings. They have big emotions. And all they're wanting to do, remember, it goes back to that belonging and significance. So if you're picking them up and you're on the phone and you're not present for them, well, they're going to do everything possible to help you hear them, see them. I'm here. And so they're not doing it to be annoying. They're trying to get your attention. They're trying to talk to you. If they're having a big meltdown and they have an outburst, instead of shuffling it under, come on, I need you just to move on. We validate their feelings. I see that you're pretty upset. I know that you want to finish your game before we get into the car, but it's just not possible. Some of the tips to be able to have the time to listen to them. We live in such a rushed and hurried environment these days. And so one of the things that we do in the classroom is we really try and slow things down. That's why they are successful in a Montessori classroom. Everything is set up for them. The tempo, the pace, the time that they need. That's why we have uninterrupted work cycle. We try not to have a lot of transitions. We try not to have a lot of interruptions because there needs to be a time. That's why consistency and routines, that time is built in so that they can feel listened to. So some of the things to try is listening, validating your child's feelings, asking conversational curiosity questions, which are very open-ended, and the motivational curiosity questions, and I'll talk about that. I love this as a reminder for me because we're in education. The root of education is educare, which means to draw forth. So when we're interacting and we have belonging and significance, we're drawing forth from the children what it is they're feeling, what it is, helping them understand why they made that choice instead of coming to a judgment and being frustrated. Stop telling. So when we're telling children constantly how they should feel or what they should be doing, ask yourself, what are we trying to accomplish? You know, when we're telling them, it looked, you did this to your brother, instead of asking them the question. How do you feel about that when it happened? Your body seems to be pretty upset, but how do you feel? What did you learn from carrying that glass pitcher and running across and it broke? What ideas do you have to solve the problem to prevent it from happening? Again, when we ask these open-ended questions, instead of spending all of our time telling, we're drawing forth. We're understanding where they are so that we know where we need to take them. And so here's another activity that we do in a little bit of a activity and then some homework assignments in the future is asking versus telling activity. So think about when you're trying to get them to move from point A to point B, go brush your teeth. Don't forget your coat. Do your homework. Stop fighting with your brother. Put your dishes in the dishwasher. Stop whining, pick up your toys. So those telling, if we get into that, I call it ordering, correcting, and directing kind of mode. The power for those children that are power and control, and we'll talk about the different types of children, what you're either motivated by either attention seeking, power and control, and there's other things that we'll talk about in trying to discover why the behavior is there, why they choose to do certain things. But when you're in that ordering, correcting, and directing mode, you're taking the power and the choice away from them. It's not really a choice to go brush your teeth because we need you to go brush your teeth. So it's kind of how you rephrase it. What do you need to do so your teeth will feel squeaky clean? What are you taking so you won't be cold outside instead of taking a jacket that they could care less about? What's your plan for doing your homework? How can you and your brother solve this problem on your own? What did we decide what to do with our dishes when we have finished eating? How can we communicate more respectfully? What is your responsibility when you are finished playing with your toys? So again, in the chat, if you can kind of just give me your thoughts on what do you feel are the difference between the telling statements and the asking? Think about you, put it in your perspective when somebody's telling you what to do versus asking you. Josie, will you read the chat?
Sure. So instructional versus empowering, that there's choices involved, accountability and collaboration. In the asking, kids are making the choices. Telling gives implicit message. The kids don't know how to make the choice themselves. They feel empowered in the asking. Ordering versus respectful way of telling. Allowing them to consider what and why doing something. The invitation to participate in the asking.
Yep. The other part of it is I think asking develops more of their critical thinking skills as well. So what's your plan for doing your homework? Oh, I need to come up with a plan. What do you need to do to help your teeth feel squeaky clean? So there's a lot more thinking that's involved, a lot more active participant.
2 more added, asking and giving power of authority and problem solving.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what are the children learning when we are telling them versus asking them? When we're asking them about how they feel or the curiosity questions, we're learning the reasons for the behavior. Too often, we're not taking the time to listen to the children, to hear their perspective. And we can't always take the time to listen to their perspective. So it's not at all or nothing. You know, there is a balance, because I think, again, when we get into it, we'll talk about it's kind of right down the middle of the road. Too often, parents will, when we're learning these skills, parents will go the complete opposite and they'll go too far, which is giving the children too much power. And so that's a whole other topic of conversation, is you want a very balanced approach. Children feel very safe and secure when we have guardrails. When we're real lenient in it and we're always giving in, they really do not feel safe and secure. And so you kind of typically fall down a kind of a parenting, I guess label is more for lack of a better word, but you're either too permissive and you kind of give them too much choices and too much leeway, and their guardrails are real loosey-goosey, or you go the complete opposite and you don't give them a little bit of some empowerment, which is very rigid. And so, but you want firm but fair guardrails and consistency, which helps them feel very safe. So, you know, when we go through this and you're trying out all these ways, it's kind of finding that balance. And I talked a little bit about connection, or I touched base on that connection. And that is, in order for us to have children want to make the right decisions, they've got to feel connected to us as adults. And they've got to feel connected to us before the correction will ever happen. And that's an important theme of positive discipline. They learn when they feel safe and secure. They can access their rational brains. So when they feel that they're connected to you and you're redirecting them or you're helping guide them to learn how to make their own appropriate choices, then they're going to feel safe and secure in order to try out and make their own decisions. Yes, they're going to make mistakes, but they're going to learn from those mistakes. And they can't learn when they feel threatened. And we talk about that rational brain. And I don't know if you can see me because I can't see my face, but we talk about those big emotions that children feel. And when they have those big emotions, their brain is flipped. So they flip their lid and there's nothing that's getting in there. You can't negotiate with them. You can't redirect them. You can't convince them otherwise. They are just in this full blown flip their lid mode. And what we need to do is try and meet them and connect with them, meet them where they are, and try and get their brain to not be flipped, to calm their body so that we can talk through things and move them through these emotions. The best way that it's been explained is what through this video here. And let me know if you can see it. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up, representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull, the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child. And that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
Okay, let me get back. And I think, uh-oh, hold on.
Those emotions,
Hold
they
on.
were put on hold by time.
All right. So I always like to have that visual, and it reminds me when we're dealing with what we think and all say is a misbehaving child, it's important to remember that they are a discouraged child. And it is through encouragement that changes brain chemistry and behavior. And this positive discipline approach and the tools that we have in the toolbox and the tools that we use in the positive discipline approach really helps to approach a misbehaving child or look at a child with behaviors and look at them as why are they feeling discouraged right now? What is in their environment that has created them or allowed them to feel discouraged? And how can we approach through connection and belonging and significance to encourage them and help them move through the challenging behaviors? So that is the overarching kind of introduction to positive discipline. Just little tidbits. I know I gave a few things of listening, a few of the tools, But in the positive discipline approach, in the sessions that we want to be able to do with you guys, we'll go a little deeper into many more tools and some of the ones that we discussed here. So I'm going to unshare my screen and kind of open up the chat to you guys for any questions that you have. I might not be able to answer them all, but what is nice for me to know is kind of where you all are at and what questions you have, and it helps kind of for us to guide these next steps in the positive discipline. Did you feel lectured? Not really. As a Montessori teacher, that this is not something that getting up in front of everyone and doing all the talking, it's a much more interactive approach. So what questions do you have?
Faye, do you want them to ask
Uh-oh,
the
hold on.
question out
I
loud?
can't hear.
Do you want them?
Josie, are you?
You to the future. And remember, the strongest force in the human.
Darn it. Sorry, guys. Hold on. Okay, is that better?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Faye, do you want them to put it in the chat, or would you like for them to ask it out loud? Some are raising their hands.
So can you see them raising hands?
I can see some. I can't see everybody. I
It's
know
nice to hear voices, to be honest with you.
the Agarwal family.
I can go.
Question.
Thank you, Ms. Josie. Hi, Ms. Faye. First and foremost, thank you very much for this session. I've definitely been reading and following. I wanted to ask, the first question I have is this going to be a series of sessions open to parents?
That is what the hope is. Typically, it's a 7-week session. And it's a smaller, I've done it, they say no more than like 20 to 25, just because you do want it intimate and you do become, it's like a support group, right? And if you get it too large. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send an email out for those that are interested in the session and kind of do a survey and see who's interested and see how we kind of do it. Do we have enough interest to have 2 sessions going? But I am going to do an interest survey.
Thank you. That's helpful to know. And the other question I have is, so I do relate with a lot of the telling portions with my second one being a very strong-willed child, as one of the objectives was. But I also see that she thrives a lot when being empowered. So that's definitely been a learning for me as I watch her grow and grow through the e-learning process of this whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
In lieu of supporting parents to better support and understand their children, is there literature that's available to kind of read, or are the support group kind of sessions that you're planning on setting up, one or multiple, whatever it turns out to be? Are those ones where we also come with questions like these?
Absolutely. And really it's based upon, so the positive, can you see? I can't tell. It's the positive discipline book. And there's lots and lots of positive discipline books that are, and I don't mean lots and lots, but it's positive discipline for preschoolers, positive discipline for teachers. My favorite one that I've done, because I've read a lot of them, is this one very much. It's Positive Discipline by Jane Nelson. It's, very simple and it's very easily read. I found it very easy. And so in the sessions, we would read this, so kind of book study, and it touches on that strong-willed child who needs to feel empowered with choices. And we'll talk about the either or, and it's very clear language that you use so that for that power and control kind of guy or girl, it's always empowering them with choices. And it's what choices are you okay with as mom, and dad. So anyway, so yes, we go through those things, and I do highly recommend. It's the positive discipline. The other favorite for me is Children the Challenge. And I love that one. It's very much in line with, it's by Rudolph Dreikurs. And he was, leading the way at one point in challenging behaviors. The only thing that I always say, and I've done this book for years, is there's one section about spanking. And, a lot of people just throw it out because it mentions spanking. I say there's a lot of good information in here, very practical, that is in line with positive discipline. Just ignore the spanking part. Don't throw a good book out just because of one section. But anyways, and so that's another one. So I always recommend these two books first and foremost to kind of give you that foundation.
Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Faye, there's two questions in the chat. One, will these sessions be geared towards a particular age range?
I would say 3 to 6 years old, but it applies to the toddler age and you apply it as they get older. I still apply the positive discipline approach with my 19-year-old. They have more, they're bigger, but it works.
And in the books also, they have one strictly for middle school, adolescents, different ages. The next question is, thank you. There's a lot of thank yous, by the way, very insightful, very helpful. As the children are getting independent, a lot of times we hear a lot of pushback, reasoning, or just walk away. How do we engage them back?
So that's got a lot. That's pretty loaded, I think. So Josie, will you read it one more time for me? That's a big question.
As they're becoming more independent, a lot of times we'll hear a lot of pushback, reasoning, or the student just walking away. And how do we engage them back? I will add, in some of the elementary as well, go into a lot of education about development of the child. And that's key and important because as kids get older, they do definitely go through different stages of independence. And so the 3 to 6 year old does look very different from the 7-year-old. And so a lot of times lower elementary students, one of the characteristics that they often say is they start to seem to be like rude, the word rude. And of course they're still learning and we're still helping and guiding them, but definitely as they get older and more independent, they're testing things. And there is a lot of information too, and instruction for positive discipline on that too.
Well, and also too, what I'll say when you have those independent children and they're using those reasoning skills, I think a lot of it boils down to listening and validating. So when we, again, kind of slide over and we're not listening to what they say, sometimes their reasoning, when we sit back and understand what they're saying, sometimes you're like, oh gosh, yeah, that makes sense. So a lot of it boils right down to listening and not trying to convince them to do something that they don't understand. A lot of times it's in clear language. I understand that you feel this way, but this just isn't one of those things that you can have a choice in. So when we talk about these kind of scenarios, this is where the interaction, I would ask for a lot more information about what it is that you're referring to, so that we could help figure out the tools that would apply.
And Faye, these are probably things that you and Children's House, I imagine, in those sessions will go over too, because I can think of a lot of things, even with, I know I mentioned elementary, but I think just even in 3 to 6, when they're talking about independent and pushing back, that even happens with the 3 to 6 year old. So it's all your win then and choices and things like that, that I am sure, I know Faye, that's some of your sessions too.
Absolutely.
Next question was, if the child resorts to crying, how do we deal with it?
Always starts with validating and explaining. I think it's important when they're young and they're crying, never to assume. A lot of times our first instinct is what's wrong. And then you start, they can't express it because they're young and there's a lot of emotions going through them. The next step that we do as parents is we and I'll just use it from an example of something that when a child comes home, the first question is, did he hit you? And so then the child doesn't, oh, I guess I need to say yes. So it always starts with allowing that child to calm their body, have their lid go down and not be flipped, validate their feelings, acknowledge that they must be upset or frustrated. I see that you are upset. Do you want to talk about it? Sometimes they don't. So it's offering that space and not, again, trying to convince them not to cry. And so again, this is where the interaction would come in and I would ask a lot more questions, but I think it boils right down to slowing down and meeting the child where they are and listening.
So I love this next question. Should both parents attend these sessions so they are all on the same page while working with the kids?
So the ideal situation would be absolutely. I think it's very important, but the reality is sometimes it just isn't possible. And if that is the case, and again, there's some logistics and things that as a school we have to look at, but if you cannot, it is important that the communication happens. You could still be doing the homework. Right now, it's going to have to be done over Zoom, so it might be easier for you guys to both attend. I'm recording this session here so that we can send that on. So there's lots of things that we can do that wasn't done in years past because, so it would be great if at least not attend, but be a participant through communication between each other.
And when you can't, the reason why I said I love this question is you absolutely have to both be on the same page so that your child's not confused. Even with just one student, one child, I have 4. And if, me and my spouse aren't on the same page, the child is going to be completely confused as to how we handle things. And so it's always good to be on the same page if you can.
And I'll go back to that challenges. So that challenges in future activity, that's one that doing that separate, especially the challenges, because what you consider challenging and what your spouse considers challenging could be completely different. And when you go to look at all the challenging behaviors, and typically you'll be able to list 6, 7, 8 challenges that you're dealing with young children. But what you want to do is you want to pick the one that you're both going to tackle. You cannot fix all the challenging behaviors. It's not we're going to do this and everything goes away. It's really approaching it from the standpoint of, okay, the one thing we both want to eliminate in the challenges is this one. And so we're going to approach it together as a team. And that's what we do in the classroom. I mean, when we're looking at a child who has some challenging behaviors, and they all have challenging behaviors throughout the year, we kind of take a look at it and we get together with our partners in the classroom and we come up with an approach and we tackle that approach together and consistently, but we can't get through all of them. It's picking one at a time and it's a tick, tick, tick.
And I know there's several questions and I know you're just touching on them just a little bit because I know you'll talk about some of these in some of the other sessions. But the next one is how to deal with kids who are not willing to do things, which we're asking.
And that goes to the choices and it's language. It's very clear language. I'll give an example of when a child comes out of the bathroom and they're refusing to wash their hands. I need you to wash your hands. And we do a lot of talking about, sometimes we as parents, we phrase what we want them to do in a question. Would you like to go wash your hands? Because we're just so sweet as parents and we think that's going to make them want to do things. Well, you've just given them a choice. No, I don't want to wash my hands. My favorite is when we say, wash your hands. And just by that simple inflection, it insinuates a question. Wash your hand. No, excuse me. Wash your hands. Nope, don't want to wash my hands because I know that you're kind of asking me the question. So it's really being clear and concise in what you want. I need you to wash your hands. The child doesn't want to wash your hands. Well, you've got a choice. You wash your hands or I'm going to wash your hands for you. And if they choose not to, because safety, we need them to have clean hands, I'm just going to put soap on their hand and we're going to rub. So again, it's not really a choice when it comes to certain things, but it's in clear language and it's in choices.
Any tips for when a child begins to identify himself as a bad kid because he's disappointed with his own behavior? So he responds with, I'm so bad.
The first thing that I always say is there are no such thing as bad children. All children are good, just bad choices. But in this situation, it sounds like there's some, perfectionist tendencies. And that's where we do a lot of talking about mistakes. It's important to make mistakes. If no one made mistakes, our brain does not grow. The only time our brain grows is when we make mistakes. And so that's just kind of flipping the situation and a mindset that really speaks to mindset. And so it's also about role modeling. Are you a perfectionist at home and have high standards and don't like to make mistakes and beat yourself up in front of your children by saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. That's so stupid of me. If they're seeing that, they're picking up on that. And so it's really trying to flip mindsets.
And being that role model to admit to your child when you've made mistakes, I'm really sorry that I did that. I'm sorry that I got so angry with you.
And I think that's an important piece to say because this isn't perfection. And I said that it's just about being the best parent that you can be. And you are going to blow up and you are going to get angry at your frustrated and angry at your child. And I think that's a good point because I think children learn a lot from that. And there's nothing, in my opinion, more special to a child when an adult because they look at us as these competent giants that they look up to and that we're so capable and they want to be just like us. And there's nothing more precious than when a grown-up can say I'm sorry to them. I think that goes a long way. I know when anybody apologizes to me, I know how humbling it can be and it goes a long way.
Faye, people are appreciative of you recording it so that others can watch, by the way.
Awesome.
When we are asking to write something or cleaning toys, they know how to do it, but just don't want to do it because we're asking them to do it. So that's an example. That was an example somebody gave.
Okay.
I assume these sessions are paid. So I guess somebody's asking, is there going to be a payment for these sessions?
No.
Would all the details be included in the follow-up emails?
Yes. Well, right now, the first step is going to be kind of information gathering survey so that we know the interest. And then there'll be more information based upon that survey.
And that was it. A lot of thank yous. This was very helpful.
Well, I'm so glad. I hate that I can't see faces. I do much better when I can interact and see and read faces. But anyways, I'm very glad. This was one of these things that Sterling has wanted to do since we brought it. I've had teachers for the last 4 years that say we need to do it. We need to do it. It's not ideal, but we wanted to rip the Band-Aid off and start it. So thank you for coming.
Hey, where can they find the recording? Are you going to email it? Or
I will email it to all of the participants. I will send it to the teachers and they can send it out to their classes, I think, and just get more of those that weren't able to attend and signed up. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Children's House teachers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Faye. Good night.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank
Fay.
you.